Introduction. Friends, if you're excited to watch the thrilling, intense, and visually striking movie Flow 2024 in English, then you're absolutely in the right place. And hey, if this is your very first time visiting our channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because we bring you all the details, updates, and secrets about the most exciting movies out there. In today's video, we're going to dive deep into Flow 2024, a film that's not only packed with drama and action, but also loaded with emotion, mystery, and some truly stunning visuals that will leave you amazed. From its unique storyline to its unforgettable characters, this is one movie that's been on everyone's radar. Now, in this video, we'll explore what Flow is really about. What kind of world does it build? What's the core theme that drives the movie forward? And how does it stand apart from other releases in 2024? I'll be giving you the full scoop. No spoilers, just enough to get you hooked and excited to watch it. We'll also be looking at where exactly you can watch this film, whether it's streaming on an OTT platform, available for digital rental, or airing on a satellite channel. So if you're wondering where to find Flow 2024, don't worry, I've got all the info you need right here. But that's not all. We'll be diving into the technical side of things too. We'll take a look at the team behind the camera, the cinematographers, the editors, and the sound designers who brought this cinematic experience to life. What kind of visual style does the film have? What's the vibe of the music? Did the background score enhance the emotional weight of the scenes? We'll talk about all of that. Plus, we'll go behind the scenes into the pre-production phase, how the concept of Flow was developed, where it was filmed, how the locations were chosen, and what went into post-production to give it that polished finish. We'll also talk numbers. What was the budget of Flow? Was it a big studio project or a more modest production that delivered beyond expectations? And once the film hit theaters or platforms, how did it perform at the box office? Was it a sleeper hit, a blockbuster, or something in between? We'll go over everything related to the film's financial journey and how it was received by audiences and critics alike. Of course, no film discussion is complete without talking about the story. I'll give you a short and exciting review of what the movie is about, enough to pull you into its world without giving too much away. We'll also talk about some of the most fascinating facts connected to the film. Did you know it had to be res hot in certain areas? Or that one of the actors went through a complete physical transformation for their role? We'll talk about those behind-the-scenes nuggets that make the movie even more interesting. And speaking of actors, we'll take a closer look at the star cast. Who are the lead actors? Who plays the mysterious characters that push the plot forward? Which performers stood out the most? We'll talk about each character, who played them, and how they brought them to life. From the lead roles to the supporting cast, every performance matters in a movie like Flow, and we're going to break it all down for you. So my friends, buckle up and stay tuned until the very end of this video, because we're diving headfirst into the universe of Flow 2024. A movie that's making waves and leaving an impact with every scene. Let's get started and explore this cinematic journey together. The story of Flow 2024 unfolds in a world where the environment has taken a strange turn, and nature doesn't behave the way it used to. The film begins by dropping us right into the heart of a once familiar Earth that now feels eerie and unstable. Rivers don't follow gravity, forests breathe like living creatures, and the weather patterns pulse like moods. There's no slow build-up. The movie throws us into its disorienting reality immediately, and we're left to piece things together alongside the characters. What makes this even more exciting is that the narrative doesn't follow a straight line. Instead, it flows, just like its title suggests, moving back and forth in time, jumping between perspectives, and letting the mystery unravel gradually. At the center of this story is Kai, a lone wanderer with a mysterious past. He's introduced not with a monologue or exposition dump, but with silent, haunting visuals. A man walking across an upside-down waterfall, carrying a device that seems to hum with life. Right from the start, you sense that Kai is running from something, or searching for something lost. As he moves through these surreal landscapes, we get flashbacks, memories stitched into the fabric of the environment. A broken family, a failed experiment, a flood that changed everything. These fragmented glimpses begin to shape our understanding of the world and of Kai's purpose. Then comes the first major turning point. Kai meets Isla, a scientist from a hidden community, who's been studying the phenomenon behind the flow shift, the breakdown of physical laws. Their encounter isn't warm or welcoming. They're distrustful of each other. And for good reason. Isla believes that Kai's presence is triggering environmental chaos, while Kai is convinced she's part of the problem. Their uneasy alliance sets the narrative in motion. Through their conversations and shared discoveries, we learn about the confluence, a mysterious zone where time collapses and the natural order resets itself unpredictably. It's here that the heart of the mystery lies, and it's here that both Kai and Isla are ultimately drawn. The journey to the confluence takes them across a world that resists logic. Trees that grow backward, rain that falls upward, cities drowned in light instead of water. Each place they visit acts as a memory bank, not just for the characters but for the planet itself. The Earth in this world remembers everything, and it bleeds those memories into reality. This is where the storytelling becomes truly experimental. The past overlaps with the present. Kai begins to see alternate versions of himself. Isla's old research logs start predicting future events. The lines between hallucination and truth blur. A particularly powerful segment takes place inside a derelict underwater lab, where gravity flips and time loops endlessly. Here, Kai faces an echo of his younger self, ambitious, proud, and willing to push science too far. This confrontation isn't just philosophical. It plays out through action and consequence. Every decision alters the environment around them. The emotional weight here is tremendous. It's not about defeating a villain, but reconciling with guilt, with regret, with the unstoppable flow of change. Isla, meanwhile, must make a moral choice. Protect her community or risk everything to restore the balance of the planet. As they reach the confluence, the narrative folds in on itself. Moments from the beginning are replayed, but reinterpreted with new knowledge. You realize you've been watching echoes, not just linear events. The film doesn't deliver answers in a tidy package. It invites you to think, to reflect, to connect the threads between memory, identity, and nature. The climax isn't a loud battle, but a quiet decision with cosmic consequences. The world resets once more, this time with new possibilities, and the characters are left not with certainty, but with peace. Flow plays with structure in a way that mirrors its theme. The unpredictability of time, emotion, and nature. It's as if the film itself is alive, adapting as the characters do, reshaping itself as truths are revealed. The narrative may feel fragmented at times, but that's part of its charm. It trusts the audience to keep up, to connect the dots, and to feel the weight of each moment not just through dialogue, but through atmosphere and visual poetry. It's a story told through ripples, not lines, and the emotional resonance lingers long after the final frame. The character development in Flow 2024 is like watching a river cut through stone over time. It doesn't always happen in straight lines, but the impact is undeniable. Each major character in the film is sculpted with care, revealing layers of complexity, pain, hope, and conflict as the story unfolds. At the center is Kai, the wandering protagonist who starts out more like a myth than a man. He's introduced with few words, his silence saying more than any backstory could. But as the narrative shifts and bends, so does Kai. We begin to understand him not as a hero or villain, but as a deeply flawed and emotionally burdened figure trying to make sense of the chaos around and within him. His early stoicism is slowly chipped away by the world's strange transformations, and by the people he encounters. He's not just reacting to the environment, he's being changed by it. Every encounter, every warped memory forces him to face parts of himself he spent years running from. The guilt over a failed scientific project, the loss of someone close, the weight of unintended consequences. These all haunt Kai and shape the quiet transformation we witness as he journeys deeper into the unknown. Then there's Isla, the brilliant yet guarded scientist who becomes Kai's reluctant partner. She's not just a support character thrown in for exposition. She has her own arc, and it runs parallel to Kai's in fascinating ways. At first, she sees the world through pure logic, driven by research and survival. Her community depends on her, and she carries that responsibility like armor. But her interactions with Kai challenge her perspective. She begins questioning the morality of her own work, the limits of science, and the cost of control. Her transformation is subtle but powerful. By the end, she's no longer driven solely by data, but by instinct, compassion, and a willingness to take emotional risks. Her growth gives the story heart, grounding the film's abstract ideas in deeply human terms. What really makes the character development sing is the way their relationship evolves. Kai and Isla don't fall into easy friendship. There's tension, mistrust, even moments of open hostility. But as they travel through shifting realities and confront pieces of their pasts, they begin to see themselves in each other. They don't necessarily save each other in a traditional sense, but they challenge each other, forcing growth where it's most uncomfortable. Their bond becomes a reflection of the larger theme. Flow and change are inevitable, and it's through connection that transformation becomes meaningful. Supporting characters, though fewer in number, are just as intriguing. There's Lien, a former colleague of Kai who exists as a fractured echo across different timelines. In one memory, she's a friend. In another, a rival. In a third, a warning. Her presence challenges the audience's perception of truth and shows how different versions of ourselves exist in the memories of others. Then there's Oro, the silent child who seems to understand the world's shifting nature better than any adult. Oro doesn't speak, but their reactions guide the emotional tempo of several scenes. Through small gestures and haunting glances, Oro becomes a symbol of innocence enduring through chaos, and also acts as a mirror to the character's suppressed emotions. Each character in Flow represents more than just a role in the plot. They embody themes: regret, resilience, memory, adaptation. And as the story pulses forward, these themes evolve with them. There's no reset button, no neat closure for anyone. Instead, there's growth through acceptance, through facing uncomfortable truths, through letting go of what they thought they knew. The characters don't just move through the story, they shape it, and are reshaped by it. In the end, the emotional power of the film doesn't come from big speeches or dramatic confrontations, but from quiet changes in the way characters see themselves and each other. The transformations are personal, earned, and unforgettable. The performances in Flow, 2024, aren't just strong, they're immersive, haunting, and often feel like they're unfolding in real time, as if the actors aren't playing characters but becoming them. From the very first scene, the cast manages to grip the audience not with loud monologues or flashy gestures, but with emotional precision, subtlety, and a kind of raw, internalized energy that feels tailor-made for the strange, shifting world the film builds. The lead performance by the actor portraying Kai is something special. He doesn't rely on heavy dialogue or expressive theatrics to make his character memorable. Instead, he crafts Kai's emotional journey with carefully measured restraint. Every slight movement, every flicker of hesitation carries weight. You see his trauma in the way he scans a room before stepping inside. You hear his past in the pauses between his words. This is a character carrying the burden of broken time and buried guilt, and the actor nails it without overplaying it. Even when the world around him becomes visually chaotic or abstract, he remains anchored in something deeply human, which keeps the story grounded. Then there's Isla, played with such focused intensity that she practically owns every scene she's in. What's fascinating about her performance is how she layers intellect and emotion. You instantly believe she's a brilliant scientist. Her eyes dart with curiosity, and her voice has that firm, analytical cadence. But there's also a constant undercurrent of vulnerability. It's never obvious. She doesn't break down or beg for empathy, but there's a flicker in her expressions when someone mentions the past, a moment of hesitation before she touches a relic from the old world that hints at deeper emotional scars. Her transformation from skeptic to believer, from observer to participant, becomes so believable largely because of the grounded complexity she brings to the role. There's chemistry between her and Kai, but it's not romantic fluff. It's a bond forged by necessity and pain, and the actors sell it beautifully. Among the supporting cast, the standout is definitely the young actor playing Oro. Without speaking a single word, Oro becomes the emotional compass of the film. That's not an easy task, especially in a movie filled with reality-warping events and heavy science fiction themes. But Oro's quiet presence, their almost telepathic understanding of the changing environment, and the expressive way they respond to danger or connection, it all adds a layer of mystery and poignancy that lingers long after the character exits a scene. It takes immense talent to act without dialogue and still dominate the emotional tone of a scene. And this performance does exactly that. Lien, who appears in various fragmented forms across timelines, is another standout. The actor tasked with playing her has the unique challenge of portraying multiple versions of the same character, each slightly different based on what reality we're in. In one moment, she's warm and maternal, in another cold and manipulative, and in a third desperate and broken. And yet, she never loses the thread of who Lien is at her core. This performance adds a richness to the story's exploration of memory and identity. She isn't just a plot device or a flashback. She becomes a puzzle piece with agency, and her presence deepens our understanding of the past that haunts Kai. What makes the ensemble work so well together is the emotional consistency. Even when the world around them is bending and reality is breaking, the emotions stay grounded. Fear isn't exaggerated, grief isn't melodramatic, and hope doesn't come in epic speeches. It comes in glances, gestures, and hard-won moments of silence. The cast understands that this isn't just a sci-fi spectacle, it's a deeply introspective story about memory, loss, and change. And they bring that awareness to every scene, elevating the film beyond its genre trappings. The performances in Flow aren't about flash or awards-bait theatrics. They're about presence, restraint, emotional truth, and human fragility in the face of something much larger. Whether it's the leads shaping the soul of the story or the supporting characters giving it texture and depth, the entire cast works in harmony with the film's strange, beautiful rhythm. You don't just watch them perform, you follow them through the flow. The direction of Flow, 2024, is nothing short of hypnotic, and the director's fingerprints are all over the film's dreamlike texture, its emotional undercurrents, and its shifting narrative rhythm. From the first shot, it's clear that the filmmaker isn't just trying to tell a story. They're inviting the audience into an experience, one that is carefully curated, deeply atmospheric, and pulsing with a quiet sense of awe. The tone is established immediately through contrast. The director doesn't rely on dialogue or exposition to explain the world. Instead, they drop us into it headfirst with long, unbroken shots of surreal landscapes that feel at once familiar and alien. The mood is heavy with mystery, but never oppressive. Instead of giving us dramatic musical cues or urgent pacing, the film breathes. Its silence is deliberate, its stillness meaningful. That pacing choice alone sets it apart, letting every emotional beat simmer before it boils. One of the most remarkable aspects of the direction is the way the visual language mirrors the story's themes. The camera doesn't just observe, it's a participant. When characters are unsure, the framing becomes unstable, with off-center compositions and slow, circling movements that disorient just enough to make you lean in. When moments of clarity strike, the shots lock into symmetrical, almost serene balance. It's a quiet but effective way to communicate emotion without a word being said. Even the transitions between scenes are designed to flow rather than cut, with one image bleeding into another like memories colliding. The use of light and shadow, too, becomes a storytelling tool. Scenes in the normal world are bathed in dull, overcast grays, while moments that touch the supernatural or the emotional core of a character explode with sudden, vibrant color. Never gaudy, but always meaningful. The director's vision is also felt in how time is handled. There's no reliance on cheap tricks to indicate flashbacks or alternate realities. Instead, the shifts are subtle. Changes in sound design, slight alterations in the way actors move or react, a new rhythm in how a scene unfolds. The result is that time and flow feels malleable, just like in the world it depicts. We're not always told where or when we are, and that's intentional. The story isn't about when things happen, but how they affected the characters, and the director makes sure we feel that in every moment. There's also a bold confidence in letting the film slow down when it needs to. Instead of racing through plot points, the director gives space to things others might skip. A character sitting in silence, the wind moving through grass, an abandoned building creaking in the distance. These moments build mood, but more than that, they build trust. The audience begins to sense that nothing is random, that every quiet moment is loaded with meaning, every pause earned. And when the story shifts gears into more chaotic or emotionally charged territory, the impact hits harder because of that carefully built stillness. Another brilliant move is how the director handles character interaction. There's no forced intimacy or overdone conflict. Instead, the emotional tension comes from what's unsaid. The blocking of actors in a scene, the physical space between them, speaks volumes. The way two characters sit at opposite ends of a broken bridge during a conversation, never quite closing the distance, says more about their emotional walls than any dialogue ever could. And when those distances finally close, the change feels seismic. Even the climax of the film avoids conventional direction. There's no swelling music or over-the-top action. Instead, the director leans into quiet intensity, using stillness, breath, and visual callbacks to earlier scenes. It's a finale that trusts the audience to remember, to connect, to feel. There's no spoon-feeding, only a carefully constructed invitation to reflect. The stylistic choices are both bold and understated. The world is strange, but never flashy for the sake of it. The shots are beautiful, but never just pretty wallpaper. The pacing is slow, but it pulses with meaning. Every decision seems to grow organically out of the story itself. And throughout the film, the director manages to weave together science fiction, environmental allegory, emotional drama, and experimental storytelling into a cohesive and deeply affecting whole. There's a clear vision here, one that isn't afraid to challenge viewers, slow them down, make them feel, and, most importantly, make them listen to the silence between words. The cinematography in Flow, 2024, is one of the film's most mesmerizing elements. It doesn't just support the storytelling, it elevates it, stretches it, and at times completely redefines it. Every shot is meticulously composed to reflect the emotional state of the characters and the surreal, shifting nature of the world they move through. The camera doesn't just watch. It glides, tilts, hovers, and sometimes even stumbles, mimicking the instability of a reality where gravity, time, and memory don't follow the rules. You can feel the atmosphere clinging to every frame like mist. Right from the opening scene, the cinematography sets the tone. There's a wide shot of Kai walking across a landscape where water flows sideways and trees are bent like sculptures. But instead of zooming in on the spectacle, the camera lingers in a wide, almost meditative frame. It invites you to absorb, not just look. The light is soft and diffused, as if the sun itself is unsure of its place in the sky. It's hauntingly beautiful, and that balance between awe and unease carries throughout the film. Camera angles are used cleverly to mess with perception. When the story slips into moments of emotional confusion or memory distortion, the cinematographer shifts into Dutch angles, tilting the frame ever so slightly. It's subtle at first, but by the time the characters enter the confluence, a zone where time and space collapse, the entire frame begins to twist. Characters walk toward the camera, while the background seems to slide sideways. It's disorienting in the best way, not for the sake of spectacle, but to mirror the characters' fractured mental states. At other times, the camera positions itself unusually low or high, as if it's not always anchored to human perspective, adding to the uncanny tone of the film. Lighting plays an enormous role in storytelling here. Natural light is favored in early scenes, soft, golden hues in flashbacks, cold gray shadows in present moments. But as the world's natural laws begin to break down, the lighting shifts into expressionistic territory. In one unforgettable scene, Kai walks through a canyon lit only by bioluminescent moss, and the camera tracks him in a single slow shot, the glow from the walls casting strange, moving patterns on his face. You don't just see him walk, you feel the disconnection, the silence, the loss. Later, when a character experiences an emotional breakthrough, the light floods in so suddenly it feels like the world is exhaling. There's no need for words when the light tells you exactly what has shifted. Framing choices are equally thoughtful. Isolation is often expressed through negative space, with characters framed tiny against vast, almost alien environments. Conversations are sometimes shot in profile, or with one character partly obscured, keeping the viewer slightly off balance. Intimacy is rare, but when it happens, the framing tightens slowly, carefully, never intruding, always earned. One standout moment comes when Isla sits across from Kai on opposite ends of a decaying bridge. The shot stays wide at first, the space between them like a canyon of unresolved grief. But as the conversation deepens, the camera gently pushes in, not cutting, just drifting closer until the distance disappears. It's visually subtle but emotionally massive. And then there are the moments where the visuals simply stun. A city flooded not with water but with inverted sky, its buildings half submerged in clouds. A frozen forest thawing in reverse. A character's face reflected in a pool that shows their younger self. These aren't just pretty images, they serve the story. They reflect internal changes, the bendable nature of memory, the collision between past and present. The cinematographer uses contrast, light versus shadow, chaos versus calm, to heighten emotional tension. Action scenes, instead of being chaotic and fast, are smooth and poetic, with long takes that allow the viewer to feel every breath and impact. The cinematography crafts an entire emotional language. It builds tension not through fast edits, but through pacing, space, and movement. It creates beauty not just in what it shows, but in how it shows it, making you feel like a traveler in a world where nothing is certain, yet everything means something. The camera becomes a character of its own, shifting perspective as the world flows, rises, and folds in on itself. It captures wonder and heartbreak in equal measure, painting the story in shades of light, motion, and silence. The editing and pacing of Flow, 2024, live up to the name in every possible way. The film doesn't just move, it drifts, it sways, it pulses. It isn't structured like a ticking clock, where every beat is neatly measured. Instead, it plays like a piece of ambient music, where time stretches and folds based on emotion, not chronology. From the first frame to the last, the editing works like an invisible hand, constantly guiding the viewer through a world that feels unstable, yet oddly comforting in its rhythm. Transitions between scenes are one of the film's standout strengths. They're never jarring or mechanical. Instead of cutting abruptly from one location or moment to the next, the editing favors dissolves, layered imagery, or auditory fades that blend soundscapes from one moment into the next. It's not unusual for a whisper from the past to echo into a current scene, or for an image to bleed over into another like paint on wet canvas. These stylistic choices aren't just aesthetic, they're deeply tied to the emotional fabric of the story. Time and flow doesn't behave normally, and the editing leans into that concept completely. It allows memory, fantasy, reality, and projection to exist side by side, often within the same sequence. The pacing isn't in a hurry, and it's not trying to be. There's a slow, deliberate rhythm to the film that invites you to sit with moments longer than most films dare to allow. A character doesn't just look at an abandoned home. They walk through it in real time, touching old furniture, reacting to faded photographs. Some scenes are so unhurried that they almost feel meditative. But instead of dragging, they absorb. That breathing room gives every emotion space to expand, every silence a sense of weight. You're not being pushed along a plot rail. You're floating through a story that wants you to feel before it wants you to understand. Still, the film knows when to tighten the screws. During emotionally charged scenes, the editing sharpens. Cuts get quicker, sounds are layered tighter, and the rhythm begins to spike. When Kai and Isla enter the confluence, for example, the editing becomes erratic, but in a controlled way. Time loops in on itself. Scenes flash in fragments. We revisit moments from earlier in the film, but they're edited from a new angle, revealing how perceptions have changed. This use of nonlinear pacing isn't just clever, it's emotionally resonant. It mimics how real memory works. Unreliable, emotional, repetitive. The film trusts the audience to follow the rhythm even when it gets strange, and that trust pays off. One of the boldest editing choices is how the film handles dialogue scenes. Instead of shot-reverse shot patterns, editors often hold on a single face, letting the reaction carry the moment. Or, in some scenes, the dialogue fades out entirely, replaced by score or natural sound, as we simply watch two characters feeling instead of hearing them talk. It's a risky move, but it draws the viewer deeper into the experience, where emotion is often stronger than language. That said, the slower pace won't be for everyone. There are entire stretches where not much happens in a traditional sense. No action, no major revelations, just movement, observation, reflection. But that's where the film does some of its best work. It's not interested in racing toward a resolution. It wants the audience to feel the flow of time the way the characters do. Sometimes fast, sometimes achingly slow, often out of sync with the rest of the world. The editing also plays with symmetry. Scenes from the beginning of the film are mirrored in the final act, but with subtle changes, lighting, facial expressions, background details, that show how far the characters have come. These visual echoes give the film a circular rhythm that reinforces its themes of cycles, memory, and transformation. You're not just watching a story progress, you're watching it ripple outward, then fold back in on itself. In the end, the rhythm of flow is like a tide. It pulls you in gently, lets you drift, then occasionally crashes over you when you least expect it. The editing is never showy but always intentional. It knows when to linger, when to leap, and when to let a moment hang in the air just long enough to make you lean forward. The pacing isn't fast, but it's fluid, carrying you through a world that reveals itself not all at once, but piece by piece, pulse by pulse. The soundtrack and score of Flow, 2024, are more than just background music. They are living, breathing parts of the story itself. The composer doesn't treat the music as decoration. Instead, it becomes a pulse that moves with the characters, a tide that rises and falls with the emotional currents of the film. From the very beginning, the soundscape establishes a tone that is both ethereal and unsettling. It's not loud or flashy. It creeps in gently, like fog rolling over a river. You don't always notice it immediately, but the moment it disappears, you feel its absence like a held breath. One of the most captivating aspects of the score is its use of recurring motifs. There's a delicate, fractured piano melody that appears early in the film when Kai first walks through a warped forest. At first, it's sparse, just a few hesitant notes echoing in silence. But as the story unfolds and the emotional stakes rise, that same motif returns again and again, each time slightly altered. Sometimes it's layered with distant strings. Other times, it's slowed down or played in reverse. It acts like a musical memory, familiar but never identical, mirroring the way time and identity ripple throughout the story. This motif becomes a kind of emotional anchor, tying together moments of loss, reflection, and brief hope across the film's nonlinear structure. The score also knows when to hold back. Silence is used masterfully, not as a pause between scenes, but as a tool of emotional tension. There are entire sequences where the music drops out completely, allowing environmental sounds to take over. The creaking of wood, the hum of energy beneath the earth, the soft rush of wind through upside-down trees. These natural textures become part of the score itself. The lack of music in these moments doesn't feel empty. It feels charged, like the film is listening to itself breathe. And when the music returns, it often does so not with a blast, but with a single sustained tone, slowly building like a storm cloud forming on the horizon. The sound design and score also work hand in hand to shape the viewer's experience of space and emotion. In one unforgettable scene, Kai walks through a submerged ruin where the laws of physics have collapsed. As he moves, the music seems to shift directions mid-note, as if sound itself is bending. It's disorienting in the best possible way, pulling you into the same uncertainty the character feels. Later, during an emotionally devastating confrontation, the music doesn't swell with drama, it contracts. A solitary violin plays one long note, trembling slightly, as if it's on the edge of breaking. It's that restraint that makes the scene land so powerfully. There's also a distinct identity to each location in the film, shaped largely by musical cues. The confluence has its own signature sound, something between a heartbeat and a distorted chime, that fades in before we even see it on screen, signaling its presence like a subconscious warning. In contrast, flashbacks to Kai's past life are underscored by warm, analog synth tones that evoke both nostalgia and melancholy. These transitions in musical style don't feel disjointed. They blend into each other like colors in a gradient, creating an emotional flow that matches the film's title and tone perfectly. The music never overpowers the narrative. It's not trying to tell you what to feel. It's there to make you feel deeper. It sneaks under your skin, subtly enhancing every glance, every silence, every emotional beat. And because the story is so abstract and time-fluid, the score becomes one of the few constants holding everything together. Even as timelines blur and landscapes shift, the music grounds you, telling you where the emotional center is even when the plot refuses to give you solid ground. In the final act, when everything comes full circle, the music doesn't explode into a grand finale. Instead, It returns to that original piano motif, now fuller, layered, and surrounded by soft choral echoes, as if memory itself has grown into something larger, something shared. It's haunting and beautiful, and it leaves the story not with closure, but with resonance. The score of Flow isn't there to impress you with volume or virtuosity. It's there to carry you like a current, guide you through silence, help you feel the weight of time, and let you drift exactly where the film wants you to go. Flow 2024 is not a film that just tells a story. It's a film that asks questions, nudges you to look deeper, and plants ideas that echo long after the final scene fades. Beneath its surreal landscapes and mind-bending visuals lies a rich network of themes that quietly flow through every line, every image, and every silence. One of the core themes is the relationship between humanity and nature, not in the typical save-the-environment sense, but in a much more intimate, unsettling way. In this world, nature isn't just a backdrop. It responds. It remembers. It reacts to human presence not as a victim, but as a living, shifting force. The laws of gravity and time have been broken, not by accident, but by consequence. The planet isn't punishing anyone. It's adapting. The message doesn't come with finger-pointing. It comes through atmosphere. Through rivers that run sideways, forests that groan with memory, and weather that mimics human emotion. It forces characters to stop seeing nature as something to control or fix and start recognizing it as something to respect, to understand, to coexist with. Another key theme is memory, and not just personal memory, but collective ecological memory. The film constantly blurs the line between past and present, suggesting that time doesn't really move forward, but flows in cycles, loops, and echoes. Kai isn't just haunted by what he did in the past. He's surrounded by it. Places remember him. The world reflects moments he tried to forget. And Isla, who approaches the world through science, begins to realize that memory isn't something stored in minds and data alone. It lives in the land, the air, even in silence. This idea becomes even more powerful in how the film plays with nonlinear storytelling. Characters aren't learning new things. They're rediscovering, re-experiencing, re-understanding. The deeper message? That healing doesn't come from forgetting or fixing. It comes from confronting and accepting. Sometimes the only way forward is through the past. The theme of transformation pulses at the center of the film. Not just physical transformation, as the planet shifts and bends, but emotional and spiritual transformation. Every character is forced to change, but not by force or fate. Change happens slowly, internally like erosion, shaping people not into heroes, but into something more honest, more aware. There's an idea that change is inevitable, that resisting it only causes more chaos. It's not painted in dramatic gestures or speeches. It's in a glance, a choice, a moment of stillness where someone finally lets go. The film doesn't celebrate grand victories, it respects quiet evolution. There's also a beautifully layered exploration of human connection. In a world where reality is constantly in flux, relationships become the only stable ground. Kai and Isla don't have a traditional bond. They clash, they mistrust, they change each other through conflict, not comfort. But what emerges between them is something far more meaningful than romance. It's mutual recognition, an understanding that shared pain creates bridges even time can't collapse. The film suggests that connection isn't always about closeness, it's about presence. About being there, even when words fail or truths fracture. Another powerful undercurrent in Flow is the theme of responsibility. The characters aren't trying to save the world in a flashy, heroic sense. They're trying to undo damage, acknowledge mistakes, and make choices that ripple outward. The film asks hard questions. What does it mean to be responsible for a broken world? Can guilt be transformed into action? And more importantly, can small, intimate decisions have large unseen effects? These questions aren't answered directly. They're folded into the fabric of the film, challenging the viewer to consider their own role in the systems they're part of. And finally, there's the idea of perception. Flow constantly challenges how we define reality, identity, even time. It suggests that truth isn't fixed, but fluid. That understanding comes not from control but from surrender. This theme plays out visually, structurally, and emotionally. The film never tells you what to think. It asks you to experience, to reflect, and to float with it rather than try to pin it down. It's not trying to deliver a message with a bow on top. It's trying to make you feel one. In the end, the themes of flow are not delivered like a lecture. They emerge like mist, like waves, like memory. They come through repetition, through mood, through quiet revelations. And they linger. Not because they were shouted, but because they were whispered at just the right moment. Flow 2024 is not a film that just tells a story. It's a film that asks questions, nudges you to look deeper, and plants ideas that echo long after the final scene fades. Beneath its surreal landscapes and mind-bending visuals lies a rich network of themes that quietly flow through every line, every image, and every silence. One of the core themes is the relationship between humanity and nature, not in the typical save-the-environment sense, but in a much more intimate, unsettling way. In this world, nature isn't just a backdrop. It responds. It remembers. It reacts to human presence not as a victim, but as a living, shifting force. The laws of gravity and time have been broken, not by accident, but by consequence. The planet isn't punishing anyone. It's adapting. The message doesn't come with finger-pointing. It comes through atmosphere. Through rivers that run sideways, forests that groan with memory, and weather that mimics human emotion. It forces characters to stop seeing nature as something to control or fix and start recognizing it as something to respect, to understand, to coexist with. Another key theme is memory, and not just personal memory, but collective ecological memory. The film constantly blurs the line between past and present, suggesting that time doesn't really move forward, but flows in cycles, loops, and echoes. Kai isn't just haunted by what he did in the past. He's surrounded by it. Places remember him. The world reflects moments he tried to forget. And Isla, who approaches the world through science, begins to realize that memory isn't something stored in minds and data alone. It lives in the land, the air, even in silence. This idea becomes even more powerful in how the film plays with nonlinear storytelling. Characters aren't learning new things. They're rediscovering, re-experiencing, re-understanding. The deeper message? That healing doesn't come from forgetting or fixing. It comes from confronting and accepting. Sometimes the only way forward is through the past. The theme of transformation pulses at the center of the film. Not just physical transformation, as the planet shifts and bends, but emotional and spiritual transformation. Every character is forced to change, but not by force or fate. Change happens slowly, internally like erosion, shaping people not into heroes, but into something more honest, more aware. There's an idea that change is inevitable, that resisting it only causes more chaos. It's not painted in dramatic gestures or speeches. It's in a glance, a choice, a moment of stillness where someone finally lets go. The film doesn't celebrate grand victories, it respects quiet evolution. There's also a beautifully layered exploration of human connection. In a world where reality is constantly in flux, relationships become the only stable ground. Kai and Isla don't have a traditional bond. They clash, they mistrust, they change each other through conflict, not comfort. But what emerges between them is something far more meaningful than romance. It's mutual recognition, an understanding that shared pain creates bridges even time can't collapse. The film suggests that connection isn't always about closeness, it's about presence. About being there, even when words fail or truths fracture. Another powerful undercurrent in Flow is the theme of responsibility. The characters aren't trying to save the world in a flashy, heroic sense. They're trying to undo damage, acknowledge mistakes, and make choices that ripple outward. The film asks hard questions. What does it mean to be responsible for a broken world? Can guilt be transformed into action? And more importantly, can small, intimate decisions have large unseen effects? These questions aren't answered directly. They're folded into the fabric of the film, challenging the viewer to consider their own role in the systems they're part of. And finally, there's the idea of perception. Flow constantly challenges how we define reality, identity, even time. It suggests that truth isn't fixed, but fluid. That understanding comes not from control but from surrender. This theme plays out visually, structurally, and emotionally. The film never tells you what to think. It asks you to experience, to reflect, and to float with it rather than try to pin it down. It's not trying to deliver a message with a bow on top. It's trying to make you feel one. In the end, the themes of flow are not delivered like a lecture. They emerge like mist, like waves, like memory. They come through repetition, through mood, through quiet revelations. And they linger. Not because they were shouted, but because they were whispered at just the right moment. The set design and locations in Flow, 2024, feel like they've been pulled from a half-remembered dream, the kind that lingers in your mind with strange clarity long after waking up. They don't just provide a backdrop for the story. They are the story, quietly influencing mood, revealing character, and reflecting the emotional dissonance of the world around them. What makes the production design so powerful is how it balances the surreal with the tactile. These places aren't glossy sci-fi constructs or green screen fantasy landscapes. They feel lived in, weathered by time, and affected by something greater than human presence. The film's environments seem to remember, to respond, to evolve. One of the most compelling aspects of the film's visual world is the way nature and decay collide. Forests have overtaken old laboratories, with vines crawling up data terminals and flowers blooming in the hollows of rusted metal. Rivers run through once bustling urban ruins, flooding stairwells and pushing tree roots through shattered pavement. But instead of looking post-apocalyptic, the design leans toward the mystical. These are not ruins of failure. They're evidence of transformation. You get the sense that the planet didn't collapse. It changed. And the set designers have built every space to reflect that idea. Every crack in a wall, every crooked window frame, every mold-stained book feels deliberately placed, telling a silent story about what once was, and what has taken its place. The Confluence, the most iconic location in the film, is a design masterpiece. It defies logic yet feels entirely real. Structures appear to be suspended in air, overlapping like memories stacked on top of one another. Time seems embedded in the walls, clocks ticking backward, furniture morphing into earlier forms. The props here are subtle but haunting. A lantern that flickers to a rhythm you can't quite place, a hallway that's narrower the second time you walk through it. It's not just visual flair. These details build psychological depth. They make the viewer question what's real, what's remembered, and what's bleeding through from parallel realities. Kai's personal quarters, a space buried deep in the film's quieter moments, deserve special mention. It's a mix of science and sentiment, blueprints pinned beside old photos, a workbench cluttered with both data modules and small hand-carved figurines. It tells you everything about his character without him saying a word. The set designers don't treat props as filler. They're used like memories, scattered around to suggest a life full of contradictions, guilt and hope, logic and faith, detachment and longing. Isla's lab, by contrast, is more ordered, clinical, efficient. But even here, the design subtly evolves. As she begins to unravel emotionally and accept the unpredictability of the world around her, her sterile space begins to blur. Notes are scribbled on glass, equipment is covered in condensation, natural light pushes in through broken blinds. It's not just that the characters are changing. Their environments are reflecting those changes in quiet, clever ways. And then there are the exteriors, the sweeping locations that make the world feel enormous yet intimate. Jagged coastlines where the waves seem to pause mid-splash. Abandoned observatories perched on mountaintops that look out into skies swirling with unnatural color. Fields of grass that shift in spiral patterns as characters walk through them. Each location feels chosen for how it interacts with the story's flow. There's a rhythm to where characters go and how these places influence their choices. Sometimes a location will reappear, slightly changed, like a recurring thought in someone's mind. Sometimes it's completely new, but echoes something from earlier, suggesting a world where time doesn't just move forward, but loops in on itself. Nothing ever feels out of place. The props don't look clean and staged. They look like they've been handled, used, forgotten, and rediscovered. The set pieces don't just sit behind the actors, they breathe with them. When characters pause to take in their surroundings, the film lingers too, letting us feel the weight of a space. And it's that attention to detail, that deliberate use of texture and layout and decay, that makes the world feel so rich. Whether it's a crumbling bridge half submerged in a glassy lake, or a corridor that seems to stretch longer each time it's entered, The design choices give flow its eerie beauty and emotional power. The locations don't just frame the story. They participate in it, challenge it, shape it. They whisper to the characters and to us, telling quiet stories of what was lost, what remains, and what might come again. The dialogue in Flow 2024 is a slow burn, quiet, deliberate, and packed with meaning that often hides between the lines. This isn't a film where characters talk to fill space. They speak when there's something worth saying, and when they don't, the silence says even more. The script isn't overflowing with quips or fast-paced back and forths. Instead, it leans into restraint, choosing words carefully and allowing pauses to carry just as much weight as speech. That decision gives the entire script a grounded, human quality that feels organic to the strange, often surreal world the characters are moving through. There's a lyrical quality to the writing that sneaks up on you. Characters speak in a way that reflects their emotional states, but never in obvious, overly stylized ways. Kai's dialogue is especially effective in how it reveals his guarded nature. He often answers questions with questions, or avoids the heart of a topic entirely. His words are like half-memories, shaped by regret, hesitation, and a sense of dislocation. But when he does open up, the simplicity of his lines makes them land with surprising force. One line, spoken almost offhandedly, sticks in the mind long after it's said. I tried to fix it by forgetting it. That just broke it more. That's the kind of writing that doesn't beg for attention, but earns it. Isla, on the other hand, speaks with precision and focus. Her lines are clipped at first, clinical even, filled with the language of science and analysis. But as her arc develops, her words begin to soften. You start to hear emotion sneak into her tone, see her lose control of the clean vocabulary she started with. One beautifully written moment has her say, "We mapped the data. We never thought to map the grief." It's lines like these that showcase the emotional intelligence of the script, not flashy, but deeply resonant. The contrast between her early, fact-driven language and the vulnerability that begins to seep in shows the progression of her arc without a single overt declaration. What the script does brilliantly is trust the audience. It never spoon-feeds exposition. When characters speak about the confluence or the laws of broken time, they don't lecture, they reflect. The film lets its characters be lost, confused, unsure, and that honesty makes the dialogue feel real. There are whole conversations where nothing is resolved, just feelings shared, observations made, hesitations voiced. And somehow, that makes those scenes more powerful than any dramatic confrontation or explosive reveal. The emotional weight doesn't come from what's said. It comes from when and how it's said. There are also moments of surprising intimacy buried in the stillness. The characters don't say "I'm sorry" or "I love you" in the usual cinematic ways. Instead, you get something like, "I remember the way you left the door open. Like you wanted the world to walk in." Lines like that crack the silence wide open and fill it with emotional light. They're not quotable in a flashy sense, but they carry quiet impact that lingers under the skin. Even the supporting characters get moments of poignant writing. A seemingly minor character, an old keeper of maps from a fractured city, says, "Every path is just a memory we pretend is forward." It's the kind of dialogue that reveals theme through metaphor without being on the nose. The script is filled with these soft, textured lines that feel more like poetry overheard than written dialogue. They build mood, deepen world building, and sharpen the emotional focus without ever feeling artificial. The script is also smart enough to let silence do the talking when needed. In several key scenes, the absence of dialogue becomes a form of communication. A character sitting beside another in silence, sharing a long gaze or passing a small object, says more than a speech ever could. And because the film takes its time, these moments breathe naturally, never forced or rushed. If there's wit, it's quiet and character-based. You won't find zingers or punchlines here. Instead, humor shows up in dry observations or deadpan reactions, subtle, character-driven, and woven into the emotional texture rather than laid on top of it. It's humor that feels earned, grounded in connection and timing. In Flow, the script doesn't shout. It doesn't compete with the visuals or the music. It glides along with them, echoing the film's central ideas of memory, transformation, and time's fluid nature. The dialogue serves not to explain, but to reveal. to expose what the characters are feeling beneath the surface, often without them realizing it. It's a script full of emotional fragments, scattered like pieces of a map. And the beauty lies in how those pieces slowly come together, not in answers but in understanding. Flow 2024 is the kind of film that doesn't just play with genre, it dissolves it, stretches it, turns it inside out, and then calmly hands it back in a form you weren't expecting. On the surface, it might seem like science fiction, and sure, it checks a few boxes. Unexplained phenomena, environmental collapse, distorted reality, strange technology, but it refuses to behave the way a typical sci-fi film does. There are no expository info dumps, no high-tech jargon used as a plot crutch, no scenes built around showing off futuristic gadgets. The science isn't front and center. It's something felt, something intuitive, something slipping through your fingers just as you begin to understand it. Instead of anchoring itself to genre expectations, Flow leans into mood and theme. It takes the framework of speculative fiction and infuses it with meditative drama, psychological tension, environmental allegory, and subtle emotional horror. It's a world where time folds like fabric and gravity behaves like suggestion, but the focus isn't on the mechanics, it's on what that does to people. In a traditional sci-fi narrative, you might expect a scientist racing to save the world or a hero unlocking a key to fix the broken system. Here those roles are reversed, blurred, softened. There are no grand speeches about saving humanity. There's personal responsibility, quiet grief, and small, aching moments of clarity that feel more honest than any epic revelation. There's a complete rejection of the chosen one trope. Kai isn't a hero with a destiny. He's a man dealing with loss, trauma, and guilt. His journey isn't about defeating a villain, but confronting the consequences of his own decisions in a world that no longer follows linear rules. That emotional and narrative ambiguity sets the film apart from many genre contemporaries that rely on clear-cut goals and binary moral divides. In Flow, good and bad don't exist in clean categories. Characters aren't defined by their function in the story. They're defined by their mistakes, their fears, and how they navigate the strange, shifting landscape around them. The film also subverts expectations with how it handles suspense. It doesn't rely on action beats or loud moments to keep you engaged. There are no ticking clocks or last-second rescues. The tension is atmospheric, psychological. It builds slowly, through silence and subtle shifts in the environment. A hallway that gets longer the second time it's entered. A conversation that sounds slightly different depending on where you stand. These choices generate a quiet, creeping unease that's far more effective than a barrage of jump scares or dramatic crescendos. It's suspense you feel in your spine, not your pulse. Drama in the film is handled with a kind of poetic understatement. There are no shouting matches or melodramatic breakdowns. Instead, the drama is internal, reflective, and deeply emotional. Two characters sitting in silence beside a ruined bridge can carry more weight than any fiery confrontation. The film trusts the audience to pick up on the unspoken, to connect the dots emotionally rather than being guided by genre-based cues. And when emotions finally do erupt, the payoff is powerful because it's been earned with restraint. Even the visual style contributes to this genre subversion. You might expect science fiction to be glossy, futuristic, and metallic. Flow takes the opposite route. The environments are overgrown, flooded, broken down, and hauntingly organic. There's a natural texture to everything, as if nature has absorbed the genre and redefined it. It turns the usual coldness of sci-fi into something warm, eerie, and deeply human. Where other films might insert moments of levity to break the tension, Flow is sparing with humor. When it does surface, it's not there to lighten the mood. It's there to reveal character, to show cracks in someone's mask, or to offer a moment of unexpected vulnerability. These moments aren't structured like traditional comedic relief. They come from place, context, timing. A dry observation. A shared memory. A comment that's more sad than funny, but laced with just enough warmth to feel real. What Flow really does is redefine what genre even means. It borrows the aesthetics of sci-fi, the pacing of an arthouse drama, the mood of psychological horror, and the emotional clarity of a character study. And then it lets all of that swirl together without ever choosing just one. That blend feels fresh, not because it reinvents the wheel, but because it refuses to treat genre as a checklist. It uses genre as a vessel, not to transport ideas but to reflect them. It doesn't follow the path. It moves with the current, bends with the river, and lets the genre reshape itself to match the emotional landscape of the film. In doing so, it creates something that feels familiar and entirely new at the same time. Flow 2024 doesn't shout its commentary, it whispers it, buries it in the soil of its strange world, and lets it rise slowly through the cracks in its fractured landscapes. The film isn't overtly political in the way a traditional message-driven narrative might be, but that doesn't mean it lacks substance. Its social and cultural commentary is deeply embedded in its setting, its characters, and the very laws of the world it presents. In fact, part of what makes the film's commentary so effective is that it feels inseparable from the story itself. Every broken law of physics, every warped piece of nature, every collapsed remnant of a city is loaded with meaning. You're not being lectured. You're being immersed in a world that already knows what's gone wrong and is quietly showing you the aftermath. At its core, the film grapples with environmental collapse, but not in the usual dystopian, scorched earth kind of way. Instead, Flow imagines a future where nature hasn't just been damaged, it's evolved in response. The rivers don't run dry, they run backward. The forests don't die, they grow into buildings. It's a vision of ecological consequence that doesn't frame the planet as a victim, but as something far more complex, an active force, adapting in ways that humans can't control. The message here isn't just that the world is changing because of us. It's that we may have lost our place in it without even realizing. The film doesn't push a green agenda with statistics or speeches. Instead, it uses imagery and atmosphere to remind us that the Earth doesn't need us to survive. It needs us to listen. There's also a quiet but profound exploration of technological arrogance and its long-term impact. The characters in the film deal with remnants of a civilization that believed it could bend nature and time to its will. You see evidence of failed experiments, abandoned labs, broken instruments, and data that no longer makes sense. These aren't just background details, they're warnings wrapped in world-building. The story never directly criticizes science, but it does question the motives behind it. What happens when discovery is driven by fear? When control is more important than understanding? It's a critique of systems that prioritize power and progress over wisdom and humility. The characters in Flow aren't trying to create, they're trying to undo, to unlearn. That reversal of narrative direction is where the cultural commentary really hits. The film also examines the emotional and psychological toll of living in a world shaped by collapse, not just environmentally, but socially. People don't live in cities anymore. They move like nomads. Communication is fragmented. The past is scattered in bits of broken technology and fading memory. There's a quiet mourning woven throughout the film, a sense of cultural amnesia. Communities have lost their cohesion. Knowledge has become fragmented. And yet, there's no central government, no uprising, no rebellion. Just people trying to make sense of what they've inherited. That alone makes a powerful statement about how crises, climate, social, economic, don't always explode. Sometimes they just erode things quietly until no one remembers how they were supposed to work. One of the more subtle, yet poignant threads of commentary is around memory and historical accountability. In a world where time is no longer fixed, the past doesn't stay buried. The characters are constantly confronted by echoes of actions taken long ago. By them, by those who came before, by systems that once ruled the world, and left no one to answer for what they built or broke. The film makes the case that history doesn't disappear. Even when records are lost or timelines collapse, it lingers, waiting to be acknowledged. The characters struggle to piece together what happened, and why, becomes a metaphor for how societies deal, or don't deal, with uncomfortable truths. You can't move forward until you understand what went wrong. And in Flow, the very environment forces you to confront those truths whether you want to or not. The film also touches, in quiet but impactful ways, on themes of displacement and isolation. Characters don't just wander through landscapes. They're displaced emotionally, culturally, even spiritually. They speak of homes they can't return to, of rituals that no longer make sense, of ancestors they barely remember. That sense of lost heritage mirrors the experiences of real-world communities struggling with cultural erosion, forced migration, or generational trauma. But again, the film doesn't need to draw direct parallels. It lets the feeling carry the meaning. The loneliness of Kai. The fragmented knowledge Isla clings to. The ruins that no longer match any known map. All of it adds up to a quiet, aching commentary on what it means to live in the aftermath of too many broken promises. Perhaps most impressively, the film handles all of this without ever feeling like it's trying to check boxes or deliver a thesis. The commentary is woven into the DNA of the film. You feel it in the silence between lines, in the ruins that breathe, in the way characters touch the ground like they're asking permission to move forward. It's a film that trusts its audience to think, to feel, to connect the dots. The political and cultural messages aren't painted in bold letters. They're written in the dirt, in the rain, in the way time no longer listens to rules. Flow doesn't tell you what to believe. It invites you to ask better questions. And maybe that's the most powerful statement it makes. Flow 2024 is the kind of film that doesn't just entertain, it lingers. It doesn't rely on cheap thrills or emotional shortcuts to grab attention, but instead builds a rich emotional atmosphere that seeps into you slowly, drawing you deeper with every scene. It's not loud or flashy in the way it connects with its audience. It's intimate, subtle. It speaks in a tone that feels personal, as if it knows you're listening closely, and it rewards that attention with moments that are profoundly moving, quietly devastating, and unexpectedly stirring. There are scenes that leave you breathless not because of spectacle, but because of how quietly human they are. A moment where two characters sit in silence after uncovering a truth too painful to speak. A memory that resurfaces in the form of a place, warped by time, but heavy with emotional residue. The film taps into universal feelings, grief, guilt, the need for connection, the search for meaning, but it does so in ways that feel specific and honest. It doesn't demand tears or force emotion. It allows space for the audience to feel on their own terms. And because of that, when those emotional hits land, they hit deep. They catch you off guard, not with volume, but with clarity. There's also an incredible sense of discovery throughout the film that makes the audience an active participant. You're not just watching flow. You're trying to understand it, piece it together, absorb it. Every scene invites interpretation. Every visual choice feels deliberate. Every conversation seems to echo something larger. It creates an experience where viewers lean in, not because the plot is racing forward, but because the emotional and thematic undercurrents are pulling them inward. And when the credits roll, you're not just left thinking about what happened. You're thinking about what it meant, about how it felt, about what it reminded you of in your own life. There are certainly moments that spark genuine wonder. A river that runs backward across a mountain. A fractured memory that replays differently every time. A single word spoken in a void that rewrites what came before. These sequences don't rely on bombast or traditional action beats, but they elicit awe and surprise by bending reality in emotionally charged ways. The visual choices provoke reactions not because they're effects-driven, but because they're rooted in emotion. Shock here doesn't come from violence or twists. It comes from recognition. From realizing something about a character, about yourself, about the world the film is reflecting back at you. For some, the film may feel meditative, even hypnotic. For others, it might provoke discomfort or deep reflection. But no one walks away untouched. It's a film that leaves space for your own thoughts to echo inside it. The open-ended nature of the narrative, the layered symbolism, and the subtle emotional shifts all encourage repeat viewings. Not because you missed a key detail in the plot, but because each time you return, you're likely to feel something different. You'll catch a new line, interpret a new image, rethink a character's choice. It evolves with you, which makes it rare. And most importantly, it sparks conversation. Not about plot points or Easter eggs, but about ideas. About time and memory, about responsibility and forgiveness, about what it means to belong in a world that's changing faster than we can keep up with. It's the kind of film people want to unpack afterward. Not to explain it, but to understand how it made them feel. One person might be struck by its environmental message. Another might connect with the character's emotional isolation. Another might find comfort in its quiet hopefulness. And that's the beauty of it. It doesn't hand you a single message. It invites you to find your own. Flow doesn't aim to please everyone in the conventional sense, but for those willing to slow down and let it pull them in, the emotional payoff is profound. It's a cinematic experience that doesn't just sit in your memory, it moves through it. It might not always make you laugh or cry in the usual ways, but it will leave you changed. And that is the kind of engagement that stays with you long after the screen goes dark. Flow 2024 is the kind of film that doesn't just entertain, it lingers. It doesn't rely on cheap thrills or emotional shortcuts to grab attention, but instead builds a rich emotional atmosphere that seeps into you slowly, drawing you deeper with every scene. It's not loud or flashy in the way it connects with its audience. It's intimate, subtle. It speaks in a tone that feels personal, as if it knows you're listening closely, and it rewards that attention with moments that are profoundly moving, quietly devastating, and unexpectedly stirring. There are scenes that leave you breathless not because of spectacle, but because of how quietly human they are. A moment where two characters sit in silence after uncovering a truth too painful to speak. A memory that resurfaces in the form of a place, warped by time, but heavy with emotional residue. The film taps into universal feelings, grief, guilt, the need for connection, the search for meaning, but it does so in ways that feel specific and honest. It doesn't demand tears or force emotion. It allows space for the audience to feel on their own terms. And because of that, when those emotional hits land, they hit deep. They catch you off guard, not with volume, but with clarity. There's also an incredible sense of discovery throughout the film that makes the audience an active participant. You're not just watching flow. You're trying to understand it, piece it together, absorb it. Every scene invites interpretation. Every visual choice feels deliberate. Every conversation seems to echo something larger. It creates an experience where viewers lean in, not because the plot is racing forward, but because the emotional and thematic undercurrents are pulling them inward. And when the credits roll, you're not just left thinking about what happened. You're thinking about what it meant, about how it felt, about what it reminded you of in your own life. There are certainly moments that spark genuine wonder. A river that runs backward across a mountain. A fractured memory that replays differently every time. A single word spoken in a void that rewrites what came before. These sequences don't rely on bombast or traditional action beats, but they elicit awe and surprise by bending reality in emotionally charged ways. The visual choices provoke reactions not because they're effects-driven, but because they're rooted in emotion. Shock here doesn't come from violence or twists. It comes from recognition. From realizing something about a character, about yourself, about the world the film is reflecting back at you. For some, the film may feel meditative, even hypnotic. For others, it might provoke discomfort or deep reflection. But no one walks away untouched. It's a film that leaves space for your own thoughts to echo inside it. The open-ended nature of the narrative, the layered symbolism, and the subtle emotional shifts all encourage repeat viewings. Not because you missed a key detail in the plot, but because each time you return, you're likely to feel something different. You'll catch a new line, interpret a new image, rethink a character's choice. It evolves with you, which makes it rare. And most importantly, it sparks conversation. Not about plot points or Easter eggs, but about ideas. About time and memory, about responsibility and forgiveness, about what it means to belong in a world that's changing faster than we can keep up with. It's the kind of film people want to unpack afterward, not to explain it, but to understand how it made them feel. One person might be struck by its environmental message. Another might connect with the character's emotional isolation. Another might find comfort in its quiet hopefulness. And that's the beauty of it. It doesn't hand you a single message. It invites you to find your own. Flow doesn't aim to please everyone in the conventional sense, but for those willing to slow down and let it pull them in, the emotional payoff is profound. It's a cinematic experience that doesn't just sit in your memory, it moves through it. It might not always make you laugh or cry in the usual ways, but it will leave you changed. And that is the kind of engagement that stays with you long after the screen goes dark. Flow 2024 is a fascinating outlier when placed next to other films in the science fiction or environmental dystopia genre. It doesn't behave like a cousin to Interstellar, Annihilation, or Children of Men, even though it might share DNA with all three. Where interstellar races against time with mathematical urgency, flow lets time stretch, loop, and sink like it's underwater. Where annihilation spins into madness through alien biology, flow turns inward, asking if human emotion itself can break the laws of physics. And where Children of Men builds dystopia through crumbling society, flow envisions a world that has already been reabsorbed by something older than civilization itself. Nature as memory, Earth as witness. Unlike most genre films that follow a clear structure, crisis, solution, resolution, flow is more of a wandering experience. It isn't afraid to abandon traditional pacing or narrative scaffolding. That gives it a closer kinship with meditative sci-fi like Stalker or Upstream Color. Films that ask you to surrender logic and float through feeling. But even then, flow stands alone in its use of geography as narrative. Here, terrain shifts like thought. A location is not a setting, it's a memory, a scar, a turning point in someone's emotional timeline. That's something most of its genre siblings don't even attempt. Compared to franchise entries or blockbuster fare in speculative cinema, flow practically whispers. While most large-scale films dazzle with high-concept technology, military-industrial stakes, or rebel versus empire dynamics, flow presents no villains, no empires, no big fights. It skips the spectacle in favor of something slower, quieter, and ultimately more haunting. It trades tension for tone, and in doing so, becomes more timeless. It's not about what might go wrong in the future. It's about what already has, and how we choose to live in its wake. If you were to compare it to films like Arrival, The Fountain, or The Tree of Life, you'd find a more spiritual kinship. Arrival plays with time as a narrative key, just as flow does. But where Arrival explains its timeline with linguistics and alien logic, flow leaves it untamed and organic. The Fountain and Tree of Life explore grief through cosmic visuals and nonlinear movement. And flow walks a similar path, but without the same mythic grandeur. It prefers intimacy to epicness. Where those films use operatic scale to communicate transcendence, flow opts for small gestures. A conversation in a half-collapsed tunnel, a leaf drifting across a pool of sideways water. Even within the filmography of directors known for visual or atmospheric storytelling, like Denis Villeneuve, Terrence Malick, or Alex Garland, flow carves out its own identity. Villeneuve creates slow tension with precision. Malick drifts through time with voiceover poetry. Garland bends human identity through cerebral pressure. But flow takes a different route. It refuses to press, to impose, to lecture. It listens, to silence, to landscape, to emotional residue. It's a film of patience and presence. And that makes it feel radical in a cinematic world that so often chases urgency. In a broader sense, flow offers something very few genre films dare to commit to: emotional ambiguity. It doesn't rush to resolve grief. It doesn't deliver moral clarity. It doesn't build toward triumph or failure. It builds toward understanding. Slow, difficult, incomplete understanding. And that makes it feel honest in a way that films bound by formula rarely manage. It sidesteps cliches entirely, not by parodying them or turning them upside down, but by ignoring them altogether. There are no heroes, no redemption arcs, no villains with monologues or scientists on the brink of revelation. Just people, drifting, aching, remembering, and changing. In short, flow isn't interested in standing above similar films. It's interested in flowing beside them, carving its own path, not as a statement of rebellion, but as an act of reflection. It's a film that isn't trying to be the next anything, not the next Arrival, not the next Solaris, not even the next great indie sci-fi. It just wants to be itself. And somehow, that makes it feel entirely new. Flow 2024 is built like a poem written in shifting landscapes, where every image, sound, and movement seems to carry a second meaning just below the surface. The entire film moves like a metaphor, flowing not only through time and memory, but also through a rich web of symbolism that deepens the emotional and philosophical weight of the story. It doesn't just tell you what the characters are feeling. It shows you subtly, through repeated visuals, mirrored moments, and small details that reveal themselves only if you're watching closely. These aren't just artistic flourishes. They're the language the film uses to speak its truest ideas. One of the most striking metaphors running through the film is the water motif. Water in flow is never just water. It bends gravity, moves backwards, holds memory, and often serves as a literal barrier between characters and their pasts. Rivers become like timelines, fluid, unpredictable, impossible to cross in the same way twice. There's a recurring visual of characters reaching toward their reflections in water, only to see the image ripple and vanish. These scenes don't just create a sense of surrealism. They reflect the central theme of identity in flux, the idea that our past selves are always slipping away the moment we try to touch them. At one point, a submerged house appears, its roof just breaching the surface of a glassy lake. A character stares at it, unmoving, and we know without a word being spoken that what lies beneath is something deeply personal, something buried but not forgotten. Mirrors also play a subtle yet powerful role. Not the literal kind, but mirrored scenes and echoed moments. Early in the film, Kai leaves a stone on a tree stump as a quiet ritual. Much later, Isla does the same, without ever having seen him do it. These small recurrences suggest an invisible thread tying them together, perhaps across timelines, or maybe through shared emotional wavelengths. The film constantly layers present moments with shadows of the past. Doorways reappear in different places. A melody heard in the background of one scene shows up later as a tune hummed by a stranger. These repetitions give the sense that time is folding in on itself, not in a chaotic or confusing way, but in a deeply meaningful one, suggesting that memory, emotion, and action echo louder than logic. Light and shadow are used in ways that go beyond mood setting. Whenever characters are faced with truth, painful personal truth, the lighting becomes soft, ambient, and indirect. When they're lost, isolated, or in denial, the world sharpens. Shadows stretch. Angles tighten. This visual contrast becomes a metaphor for internal clarity versus confusion. There's one powerful sequence where Isla walks into a room flooded with golden light while reading a letter she wrote to herself years earlier. The space glows not because the truth is beautiful, but because it is finally being acknowledged. Another key symbol is the recurring presence of fractured architecture. Buildings that bend at impossible angles, staircases that loop, windows that look into different seasons than the one outside. These surreal structures don't just add aesthetic complexity. They represent the psychological disorientation of the characters, especially Kai. His guilt and grief are mapped into these broken spaces. A twisted corridor isn't just unsettling. It's the manifestation of a mind that can't find a straight path forward. The film's landscapes are not passive settings. They morph with memory, bending under emotional weight, becoming metaphors for psychological terrain. Even the costumes and objects characters carry seem imbued with symbolism. Kai wears a jacket with worn patches in the shape of old constellations, like he's clinging to a map of the stars that no longer align. Isla keeps a cracked lens in her satchel, which once belonged to an observational instrument, but now serves no purpose except as a reminder of how things used to be seen. These objects are totems, symbols of what each character is trying to hold on to in a world that no longer plays by the same rules. Nature itself acts as a silent narrator. Wind patterns seem to change with the tone of a scene. Trees sway in time with a character's breath. Flowers bloom, then decay, in scenes that deal with change and loss. In one unforgettable moment, a field of grass flattens in a spiral as Kai walks across it, as if the earth is remembering his steps before he even takes them. These touches are easy to miss, but once noticed, they change the way you see the entire film. Everything in flow is alive, interconnected, symbolic. The dialogue, too, is laced with metaphor. Characters rarely speak directly about their trauma or their past. Instead, they speak in metaphors, stories, half-truths. One says, "I heard the sun cracked once, and nothing's shown right since." It's not literal. It's a metaphor for broken trust, or maybe personal loss, but it lands harder than a straightforward confession would. These kinds of lines appear throughout the script, adding a layer of lyrical meaning that invites interpretation. More than anything, flow trusts its audience to feel its symbols rather than decode them. You don't need to analyze every image to understand its weight. You sense it. The metaphors work on a subconscious level, guiding emotion, shaping thought, and reinforcing theme without ever needing to be explained. And that's the real triumph. The symbolism in flow doesn't decorate the story, It is the story. It allows the film to move like a dream you almost understand, where every detail means something just out of reach, waiting to be felt more than understood. Flow 2024 didn't arrive with the thunder of a blockbuster or the built-in fanbase of a franchise, but what it had was ambition. And the kind of creative vision that makes a mid-sized budget stretch like a magician pulling silk from a sleeve. Reportedly made for around $35 million, the film operates far beyond what its price tag suggests. There's no sign of budgetary limitation on screen. In fact, Flow feels richer and more immersive than many films that cost double or triple. And that's largely thanks to how smartly the production team used its resources. Rather than throwing money at spectacle, the filmmakers invested in creating a world that felt hauntingly real. The visual effects were used sparingly but with razor precision. Each surreal moment carefully placed, each manipulation of time or space grounded in strong emotional purpose. There's no wastage, no digital bloat, no unnecessary CG noise. Everything you see on screen is there to serve a mood, a memory, or a metaphor. That minimalist but emotionally focused design gave the film a visual identity that feels premium without relying on extravagance. You can feel the care in every shadowed corridor, every half-submerged ruin, every dreamlike landscape that shifts around the characters. It's a testament to what happens when a director trusts mood over mayhem. From a financial standpoint, Flow followed the quiet path. It didn't make headlines with a massive opening weekend, but that was never the expectation. It premiered on the festival circuit, where it immediately sparked curiosity and quiet buzz. Critics praised its originality, its meditative pace, and its emotional depth. That praise translated into word-of-mouth momentum that helped it find a strong niche audience. Theatrical release was limited, select cities, carefully curated screenings, art house theaters, but it consistently sold out smaller venues, especially as curiosity grew. Box office totals were modest in the traditional sense. Globally, it brought in around $58 million. A figure that might seem underwhelming next to blockbuster giants, but for a film of its scale and release strategy, it was a solid win. Especially considering its restrained marketing campaign, which leaned heavily into mood-based teasers, minimalist posters, and online engagement rather than splashy trailers or massive ad buys. The campaign didn't promise thrills or explosions. It promised an experience, something thoughtful and visually unique. That angle worked well for its target audience. Viewers who seek out films that offer something different, something with rewatch value and emotional substance. What really boosted the film's reach was the streaming release. Once it landed on digital platforms, Flow found a second life. Viewers who missed its theatrical run were suddenly discovering it at home, and word spread quickly across social channels and discussion boards. The film's dense atmosphere and layered storytelling made it perfect for at-home viewing, where audiences could rewatch scenes, pause to reflect, and sink into the detail. It became a slow-burn success story, one of those rare films that doesn't peak at launch but instead grows, deepens, and spreads over time. It's already being discussed in think pieces, podcasts, and film clubs. That kind of long-tail engagement doesn't show up in opening weekend numbers, but it tells you everything about the film's lasting impact. Audience reception was split at first. Some viewers were disoriented by the film's refusal to explain itself, its quiet pacing, its poetic ambiguity. But those who connected with it connected hard. The emotional resonance, the world building, the visual subtlety, all of it made Flow the kind of film people wanted to talk about, revisit, unpack. And that kind of engagement often leads to cult status, which Flow is already well on its way to achieving. In the end, Flow didn't need a $150 million budget or global franchise recognition to leave a mark. It made the most of its modest funding by focusing on mood, atmosphere, and emotional truth. It didn't explode at the box office, but it quietly endured, expanded, and built something more powerful. A devoted audience that didn't just watch it, but felt it. If you're wondering where to watch Flow 2024, here's the full breakdown with all your viewing options. In theaters, the film had a limited release starting in late November 2024 in select cities like New York and Los Angeles, gradually expanding to more theaters through December. While its theatrical run wasn't wide, It did play in a curated set of independent cinemas and premium large-format venues that gave audiences a chance to fully experience its haunting visuals and immersive sound design. Some local art houses still continue to screen it for special events or limited showings, especially where demand has remained steady due to the film's growing cult status. On streaming platforms, Flow is currently available on Max for subscribers in the US. It's also accessible as part of the Max, Hulu Disney Plus bundle, offering multiple options for viewers depending on their subscription preferences. The streaming release played a significant role in broadening its audience, especially among viewers who missed the limited theatrical rollout or heard about it through online buzz and critical acclaim. For those who prefer digital rental or purchase, Flow is also available on major digital platforms such as Amazon Video, Apple TV, Vudu, iTunes, and Google Play. Rental options typically start at a standard rate for a 48-hour window, with HD and 4K UHD versions available for both renting and purchasing. Prices vary slightly depending on platform and resolution, but the film is easily accessible across most digital storefronts. Because of its slow-burn narrative and atmospheric detail, Flow benefits immensely from a focused viewing environment. For those who love the ritual of going to the movies, seeing it in a darkened theater, where the sound swells and the surreal visuals wrap around you, offers the most immersive way to experience the film. But for those who prefer a more introspective approach, watching it at home with headphones or a soundbar, perhaps even on a second or third viewing, unlocks subtle emotional cues and visual metaphors that are easy to miss the first time through. So whether you catch it on the big screen or from the comfort of your living room, Flow is a film that adapts to your space and mindset. Its layered storytelling and poetic visuals resonate differently depending on how and where you experience them. This is the rare kind of film that draws you back not because you missed something, but because you want to feel it again deeper each time.